Welcome to the HeartStream Musings podcast, a podcast to help you on your journey of self-love. I'm your host, Lisa Mae Francisco, a self-love coach and inner child guide. In the podcast, we'll dive deep on how to heal your inner child wounds, break your relationship patterns, and liberate your truth so you can claim the relationships in life that you deserve. Thanks so much for listening. I'm super excited that you're here. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the HeartStream Musings podcast. I have a lovely guest today. Her name is Nora Ring, and she is a women's empowerment coach based in Berlin. And Nora and I met when I was traveling to Berlin. Well, no, we didn't meet. We
wanted to.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Okay, so I was traveling to Berlin. I got hooked up with a spiritual community and I just want to get plugged into the scene. That was my second time going to Berlin. I just wanted to meet some cool peeps because I was traveling solo. And Nora and I were supposed to meet. She was the only one that reached out to me in the group. So I was like, okay, I have a friend. I'm going to have some tea with her. And then you ended up getting sick.
Yes. Yeah. I saw in your like WhatsApp handle or something, I saw that you were like a self-love coach and I was like, a colleague, let's reach out. But then it didn't work out, unfortunately. Yeah. I don't know how we actually reconnected then in the end.
I think what ended up happening is you reached out again. And I think you saw as you were getting into more and more of your business, then you're like wanted to know about it. And then we just have, we're online friends and we have these like monthly hangouts on Zoom.
It's great. I love it.
And so naturally, when I started having guests on my podcast, I just thought, oh my gosh, Nora has such great messages to share. And she does so much amazing work doing shadow work, inner child work. And so if you haven't checked her out, I will share all of her information in the show notes, but she really has great Instagram videos, TikTok videos, super helpful, always providing tools, different self-love challenges, all that stuff. But I would love to welcome Nora Ring. So say hi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I feel really honored and happy to be here. And hello to your community.
Amazing. So I think it would be so helpful to understand, how did you even get into this line of work? Because I know that you also are a yoga teacher too. So I'm just really curious about your spiritual background, what you even like, how you even came to be into like who you are right now. So
okay, well, I'm going to try to make this like not too long. But I think the main thing was that, well, I originally studied marketing and was in marketing for a while and really felt like there was like not enough human connection for me. And like, I think I've always had this thing that people would always come to me throughout my life and like ask me for support, emotional support and stuff. And although this is, of course, something that I also had to work through to set boundaries there, I feel like that's definitely like a talent or innate talent that I always kind of had. And I really missed in like my office job, like, the human connection, the meaningfulness in my work personally for me. Like I have other clients who still work in marketing and they love it. So I think everyone has to find what works for them. And then I also had like a huge like spiritual awakening when I was 19, was when I was going through my worst breakup, I think, and was really, really heartbroken. And I think I was really like so at the rock bottom that I was like, okay, either you can like break through this or you can like build yourself up. And that was really when I got into everything around self-help and spirituality, podcasts. And it is like accompanied me throughout the years. And then I thought for a long time which way to go. And then I decided to do the training to become a psychological counselor. Before that, I did my yoga teacher training in India. And now I just finished my hypnosis certification as well. So I'm doing all of that in my practice.
So many different tools. And so when you were at that job, what was that moment like for you? Because I know a lot of people, they're probably in a I mean, I don't know if you get this a lot too, but people are in jobs that they don't necessarily like. And you
Yeah.
just have this courage to kind of take that leap and go after what you truly desire. What was that experience like for you?
So for me, it was my health. It was really
Mm.
like my health was just down. Like I got mononucleose. I don't know how exactly to say it in
Oh,
English. Like I
oh, it's
had that
mono. Yeah.
mono, yeah,
Wow.
mono.
Hmm.
And after that, for 2 years, my health was just so bad. Like I just caught every single thing that was around me. Like nothing like super majorly like bad, but like just, it just shows my immune system wasn't on. And it's actually interesting. I talked to a astrologist about it once, and they said something in my chart like is connected to when my emotional well-being isn't well, like my body reacts straight away, which is of course something that also works for a lot of other people, but apparently for me even stronger. I don't know.
Wow.
So I felt like I literally couldn't do it anymore. Like I was working the 8 hours, and I felt at the end of the day, I felt so drained, and like,
Mm.
yeah, there was just really not much of a different way out anymore. And then I also met my partner who was self-employed, or still is self-employed. So I had that inspiration, and like just to see how life could be different. And and then I kind of just went to India, decided to not keep my job, and
Uh-huh.
then came back and started just teaching yoga full time first. And then
Oh, okay. So then after you quit, you were like, okay, I'm going to become a yoga teacher.
yeah.
And while you were there in training, what were some of kind of like those aha moments or just insights that you were receiving?
In the yoga teacher training,
Yeah, yeah.
well, well, actually, the main thing that came up in my yoga teacher training was that my partner, who I'm still with now, was planning to move to London. So, like,
Oh,
it was the first time that we were like apart for like longer than 2 weeks. So the yoga teacher training is a whole month. And then he just texted me, it's like, babe, I might be moving to London. So
oh no.
that was actually the main thing that I was moving through in that yoga teacher training, of this, like, okay, like now you have the relationship where you feel so comfortable and so like loved and loving. And now
Yeah.
like that person is moving away, and like how does your life look like when the person isn't there?
Oh,
So
wow.
to the things that came up there, it was more that, like, I think for me with the business, it was such a long process that there was, like, in the moment after I made the decision, there was just no way back. Like, the thing though, what I was considering at the time was to study psychology for 5 years. And I
Wow.
was like, the thing, like, do I really do that? Do I want to invest the money? Does that actually like make sense for what I want to do? So again, this like going away from this very conservative way of like living 9 to 5 to then studying for 5 years, because that's the only reason why you could allow yourself to stop working, right?
It's true.
And
It's true. A lot of people have those edgy. It's like, let me have a moratorium from the corporate world and
yeah,
I'll just go off and study.
exactly. And it's like only when you do that can you allow yourself to like pivot. And like for
Yeah.
me, that was a huge like block that I had to overcome, that I can like do what lights me up, and I can help people with just modern tools and courses and certificates and stuff.
Yeah. So then how was that period for you? Right. So you were like teaching yoga full
Mhm.
time. And then how did you get into the actual coaching and choose,
Yeah.
women's empowerment for yourself?
So I got into the coaching. I decided for myself, I'm going to do the coaching training first and then just coach throughout my psychology studies. That was the original plan.
Uh-huh.
And so I was going to do the coaching course for a year. And I knew that for that time, I wasn't gonna like study again, right? So through that time, I wanted to do yoga and make money through that. I also worked at a cafe for a while. So like maybe to mention that, like in the really very first start, I was babysitting. I was working at a cafe. I was teaching yoga. I was doing like mindfulness talks and stuff, like, and then just step by step, like everything where I felt my time wasn't valued enough, or like,
Mm,
my work
mhm.
wasn't valued enough through money. I let that go. But yeah, sorry, what was your question again?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
um,
So how did you decide on becoming a women's empowerment
yeah.
coach and get into, yeah.
So that was, well, I actually had someone coach me throughout my coaching training. Like it was
Uh-huh.
like a super synchronistic thing where like I met her through the platform Medium where you can write articles and stuff. And
Yes.
she was like, I like your energy. I just want to support you and I'm just going to coach you for free for 3 months. And she actually made a post then on her Medium later. And she's like, Nora's looking for practice coaching clients and stuff. And through that, it became really clear very quickly that the people who came to me oftentimes were people who were always in the energies of other people, right? Always people
Oh.
pleasing, not really sure who they actually were, not really sure like what their authentic selves looked like. And then reflecting on that and then on my own journey, I was like, this is what I do is actually like empowering coaching, right? Empowerment
Mm.
coaching. Like I help women to empower themselves to lead the lives that they want, to come back to their authentic true selves, and then therefore find authentic and fulfilling relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it just kind of became clear through the coaching. Like I didn't really decide that before, I would say.
Right, right. And I think there's something so special about that of letting it organically happen and unfold in divine
Mm,
timing of no, it's kind of like it found you and you notice that there were
mm,
certain people that were attracted to you that liked your coaching and kept coming back. And so
yeah,
that's how you kind of fell into it, which is beautiful.
yeah. Yeah.
And so what, so when people come to you of like maybe they have a hard time of finding out who they are, what kind of work do you do with them?
So what is actually interesting, that's something that really became clear over the last month, is that a lot of people who come to me are very disconnected to their emotional side. So they very much
Ooh.
have this like kind of mentality of just like closing your eyes and like getting through it, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I mean, as you know, I also like do a lot of inner child work. So like
yeah.
what I do oftentimes is really connect that to the childhood. And what often becomes clear is that they had like a home where their physical needs were met, but not necessarily their emotional needs. So oftentimes I also have people who were bullied as a child, which of course like leads
Mm,
even more to you not really feeling like you can show up as your true self. And like really doing a lot of inner child healing through
yeah.
hypnosis and through shadow work. And yeah, I don't know like if your listeners know about shadow work, but
Yes, yes. But
okay,
explain how you do it because I think
okay.
you do a lot of it. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, because that I think is like a whole, so just to go back to your question really quickly. So I think it's like finding your true self is really not just about celebrating all the things that are good about you, which I think is super important. Like that's one of the main homeworks that I give my clients, like write down everything that you love about yourself and read it out every day to
Yeah.
yourself. I love myself because, but it's also about looking at the things that you feel shame about. And I feel like that's
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes where I feel like so much like emotion and so much like stacked up stuff that can be released. And
Yeah.
that's what I do through shadow work, where like you kind of learn that we all have everything in us, right? We all have the lazy
Mm.
part in ourselves. We all have the ambitious part in ourselves. So we can all be ugly. We can all be pretty. We can all be kind. We can all be mean. And what oftentimes is the case that the clients that I work with, they have a lot of shadow, like probably most people that have never done shadow work, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
um, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, and then I have like certain like coaching techniques to kind of get those shadows out and like figure out, okay, what is, for example, what is the worst thing that someone could write about you in a newspaper, right? Like the
Mm.
words that you would be described with. And again, for most people, that's like lazy, that's ugly, that's fat is also a really common thing. And that's not just
Oh.
like society, or that's not just upbringing, that's also society, right? Like all these
Mm-hmm.
things that yeah, we carry with ourselves. And then what I do with them is figure out, okay, what is the gift in that? Like seeing the beauty in what you kind of disclose from yourself and detach from yourself. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
detach something from yourself, it becomes like it gets a power over you and become very negative. Yeah. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's like I try. I don't know how much you want me to go into detail about
No,
this.
no, it's good. It's good. It's almost like, it's so necessary, right? When you talk about
Mm,
self-love of, the totality of a human being. And there are certain things about us that we just want to hide or suppress from. But until we learn to love all parts of ourselves, we can't necessarily bring that in a relationship. Because all the time when I work with clients, it's more of like, I want to have a healthy partnership, but I don't know how. So that's sort of the key thing. So like, so that's like the majority of women clients who I work with. And it's like, oh, so what are the beliefs that you have about yourself that prevent you from thinking that you actually can be in a really loving relationship? And so we do get into a lot of shadow work, and I think it's so important. And it was so interesting because I have Kim Cran's archetypes deck. I don't know if you have her. She's amazing. And I was reading about the shadow for one of my clients, and I'll read it here because we were pondering on it. And I think it's so resonant for what we're chatting about. But basically it was like, if you could, okay, here it is. Contemplate the following scientific observation. The closer an object, a person, place, or community is to the light, the longer the shadow it casts. And to me, I interpret it as, you know, the more light you had, the more shadow work you've done.
It's way to look at it. Yeah. And like the way I also see it though, is like someone who, for example, someone who really brings something like crazy strong to the outside, like someone who, for example, really wants to bring to the outside that they're super smart, right? They want to always have the quickest answers. They always want to like say the smartest thing. It's very likely that they have the part of being dumb in their shadow aspect. You probably know this from your practice as well. Dumb is like, I think also one of the most common ones. And they're really so afraid of themselves being dumb in any way. And they might, like, just to show like the how a shadow can impact you negatively, they might not trust like maybe their intuition. They always need to learn. They always need to like, you know, or maybe they can't listen to other people because they always need to be the smartest person in the room. And like, it just shows again, like there's so many examples how healthy it can be to like integrate your shadows. So you're on the, like, it's like a scale, right? You have someone who's super, super smart, like smart ass, you know, over here. And then you have someone that's super, super dumb over here, but you need to learn that you're like in the middle, in between learning and listening to other people. And you can also sometimes be a smart ass, and sometimes you can also be super dumb when it's just something that is nothing in your field or whatever. Yeah.
So it's almost just like this overcompensation for the parts of you that you don't feel that you like. And you mentioned also about hypnosis. And so congrats on completing that program. I had no idea that you were getting certified in that. And so for people that don't know how to incorporate hypnotherapy, or understand what that technique is, I would love for you to share what that is.
Yes, of course. So I've worked with my clients for a while with like healing meditations, and now I just got certified in hypnosis, which is it's very similar to deep meditations, just it goes a bit deeper, right? Some people I feel like are a bit afraid of hypnosis when they hear that. I'll have clients that have like worked for me with me for a while, and they are doing my healing meditations, and then I'm like, okay, come on, let's do hypnosis today, and they're like, what, hypnosis? Like, I don't want you to make me do strange stuff. So I want to start with that, like that you are you are always aware of what you're doing, but hypnosis is just a way of like really getting your brain into an alpha or theta state and like accessing your subconscious, accessing your intuition. And basically the way I use it is especially for shadow work and inner child healing, where I help my clients go back to a memory. So oftentimes the way sometimes they'll come to me and they're upset about something, and then we'll go into the feeling that they're feeling, and then go back to what the feeling shows them that they need, but also where they felt the feeling the first time. And it's interesting that oftentimes, like there's a saying, right, when it's hysterical, it's historical.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes the more triggered they are in the moment, the more it actually has to do with something from the past. And then
Yeah.
where hypnosis can be just so helpful, like you can literally tell your brain or give your brain an image of a different upbringing that you actually had. And that doesn't mean that your parents are bad people in any way. They did the best they could or knew at the time, but that doesn't mean that there would not have been better ways for you to grow into the most authentic being and beautiful self that you could be now. And that's what you can do in hypnosis. And yeah, I actually have, I don't know if anyone wants to try it. I have an inner child soothing meditation, it's still called, but technically it has a lot of hypnosis impact if anyone wants to try that.
Ooh, so we'll put that in the show notes,
Yes.
that little freebie of doing that, especially if you haven't tried it before. And so when you speak about inner child work, how did you even come across it yourself, and how has it impacted your life and healing?
So I came across it in yoga studios here around Berlin. It's becoming really more of a thing. And then also throughout this book, actually, Homecoming,
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's a lot about inner child healing and what you would have needed in each stages of the process. Yeah, and just like different kinds of self-hypnosis modalities. And I
Mm.
found it to be extraordinarily helpful for me, like really just to feel that release of like, I feel like oftentimes when you're like in therapy and stuff, you talk about the things and you bring up a lot of stuff and then you just kind of sit with it. But
Yeah.
you don't know what to do with it. Like, of course, you're processing a lot by just looking at it and doing the grief work, feeling it. But I feel like hypnosis is really able, like personally for me, and what I get as feedback really gives you the safe space of like feeling your emotions, doing the grief that you weren't able to do at the time because you didn't have the support system because you were so small. And then literally just making new synapses that make you feel loved, that make you feel safe, that make you feel peaceful, anything that you needed in childhood.
Yeah. So that's why it's so important to do inner child work, just because you can literally rewrite what happens. You can change that narrative, and you don't have to be in that prison. And so it's so beautiful that there's another technique of like, how do you access those pre-verbal feelings and emotions that you can't really articulate. And so that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. And I feel
Uh-huh.
like it's, sorry.
Yeah. Go
I
ahead.
feel like it also helps with your parents now. Like, I feel like
Totally.
my mom doesn't trigger me as much anymore because I feel like I have the love of my like cosmic mom, or however like you want to call
Oh,
that in those
yeah.
hypnosis, like inside of me, so it's like you're almost not as raw anymore because you've done that like healing.
Yeah, it's almost like the more inner work you do, because to me, it always relates back to some younger experience. Like
Yeah.
100% of the time, it's like you may have that experience in that actual moment, but to your point, if it's hysterical, it's historical. It always
Yeah.
comes back to that. And then it's like, oh, when you learn how to self-soothe, then it just creates this sort of like loving reservoir inside of you, so that when you go meet that person again that maybe hurt you before, it just becomes less
Yeah.
of a trigger.
Yeah.
So
How
yeah.
about you? How did you come across inner child healing? If I don't know, am I allowed to
Yeah.
ask questions?
No, of course. Of course. Yeah. No, let's make this totally dynamic. I came across it. So I was living in New York for like almost a decade. And then I came back home because I was getting my MBA part-time. And
Mm,
so I ended up moving back in with my parents.
mm,
And that to me was just like, I had done spiritual work before that. And then coming back and realizing, oh, this is something completely different. And
mm,
so it's almost, the hero's journey, heroine's journey of, leaving home, coming home as this new person. And how do you find this new dynamic in a way where all of you change? Maybe some of you haven't. I was
Mm.
off in New York thinking that my parents were doing the same spiritual work as I did. Like that was just me being naive. And so I had to, like, a lot of memories came back. So I disassociated a lot from childhood. I couldn't really remember things, just only feelings.
Mm.
And I remember just being around both of my parents and realizing, oh, that is why I feel overly responsible. Oh, that is why I can't, express my
Mm.
desires or needs, or that is why I'm so critical of myself. Like everything just kind of came together, the puzzle pieces, even though it was like the medicine that I did not want to fucking take. And it was
Mm.
so hard for me. And I had like all these health issues because it's almost like getting re-traumatized at like a subtle level,
Yeah.
but not understanding why. And so through that process of having to literally repair it myself in real time, stand up to myself, to the people of like,
Mm.
hey, I don't like it when you talk to me like that. Hey,
Mm.
I'm setting boundaries with you. And then I ended up finding a spiritual guide, like mentor and teacher. And she and I like really did a lot of inner child work together. So I was doing that while I was living with them for like 3 years.
That
That
sounds
and
tough.
and, and I was like working in fucking fintech and
Wow.
like doing my MBA part-time. It was like the 3 years that were so needed, but it was the 3 years I do not ever want to do again. Like,
Mm,
but
God, that
yeah.
must be hard, especially when you're just having the realizations. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
I personally went through a time where I was like even stricter with my mom, because I was like,
Yeah.
you should have done this, and like you
Yes.
have like, I'm not gonna say it on the
No, but it's like,
podcast.
I'm so glad you talk about that because there's like this arc, right?
Mm,
Of like grieving your childhood, getting fucking
mm,
angry of like, you didn't give me the shit that I needed, and like blame essentially. And that's what I went
yeah,
through of like, I'm like this because of you, you asshole.
yeah.
No.
But I think it's so important to go through that, right? Because if you
Totally.
skip that and you're straight away like, my mom did the best she could, my dad did the best he could, like you're really avoiding your feelings, right? Like in my coaching course,
Yeah.
it was called like the Valley of Tears. I don't know if you can translate that into English. It
Oh,
was a German course, but like this, like when you don't go through the Valley of Tears, like you're not going to be able to let it go. Like I had
wow.
just
Yeah.
been like working with like someone who like hasn't gotten over their breakup, and like it's been like a
Mm,
year, and I think anyone needs to take as much time as they need to get over a breakup. For anyone can different, but like she was just avoiding the feelings, and I think it's the same thing
mm,
with like inner child healing, like when you don't face the feeling side of things, which I think is
yeah.
what is so like promoted in our society, like just be cool and like be detached and just always feel like
Right.
fine by yourself, like you're not going to
Yeah.
get that healing, and you're not going to get to the next stage of actual like integrating.
Right. Because it's almost something about like if I acknowledge these fears or sadness and kind of indulge it or share
Mm,
about it, there is this feeling of like, oh, I might be too needy in a way, which I get a
mm,
lot of like, oh, I don't want to appear too needy. I don't like,
mm,
there's just some sense of pride in being independent. And I
mm.
think because it's so like, oh, don't be codependent, don't be
Yeah.
codependent, that people don't understand. And I didn't even learn this until I was with my therapist of like, what is actual interdependence?
Mm,
I was like, I thought there's only codependence and
mm.
independence. Like, what is this middle ground?
Yeah, I know, like I'm just reading Attached, and
Yes.
like
Uh-huh.
it's so interesting because I also always thought like you have codependence, and you have independence, but like they speak really like about it, and I think it makes so much sense how when you have healthy attachment, that's
Yeah.
when you are able to like fly out of the nest, but when you don't have that
Yes.
healthy attachment, that's when you're like, either anxious or avoidant, whatever. and and you don't have that that strength to go out. So I think it's so important, and that's again this like shadow, right? Like having needy in
Hmm.
your shadow aspects is so common. And like, what is the gift in being needy sometimes? Like,
Right. Or almost just like reframing that in a sense of like, it is actually healthy to need other people and say
yeah,
you need help or you want
yeah,
support or,
yeah,
like there's nothing wrong with that. And maybe it's the fear of just like not getting your needs met, even when you had it.
mm,
So it's like that rejection coming up.
yeah.
Um, but now that you're reading Attached, how is that landing for you? Because you mentioned in the very beginning of like being like at your bottom of that relationship that kind of just catapulted you into this whole spiritual realm?
Mm. It's really interesting because even though I do a lot of relationship coaching, like, or people who like are
Yeah.
trying to, call healthy relationship into their life, I've never actually read Attached. And now that I'm planning to do like a relationship workshop, I was like, okay, I have to have at least read it, And I never like so connected to to the attachment theory so much because I always felt like myself, I could be like avoidant and I could be anxious at the same time. But yeah, like, so the way it worked for me was like, I was just like, so at a rock bottom with my ex at the time, who was like always like hot and cold, which really actually now reading the book makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I think for me, what I just went through was like just always being there for him and always being like the emotional support and like kind of always having to make sure he's feeling fine so I can have my needs met. And that's exactly what I picked up in childhood. So and I like that just became worse and worse, and like it was red flags from the beginning on that I just chose to ignore.
Yeah.
Of just like hot and cold, and and then in the end, like, we were together and like everything was like super happy and fine, and then like from one day to the next he was like, yeah, I just don't have enough feelings for you. And that literally happened to me twice in my
Oh my gosh.
and that was the moment where it's like I think like I would say like him and my partner now are like the two big loves that I had in my life. So like at the
Yeah.
time, him being my first like real love, it hurt so much. And like I just realized that throughout my life, throughout my teenage self and everything, like I always made my self-worth dependent on any man that was in my life, right? Whether that like any guy that I was dating, any guy that I was obsessing about, and they oftentimes had problems and struggles, and and weren't really available. And that was really the moment where I was like, okay, I gotta like find my self-worth in myself. Like it really, at
Yeah.
that point, it really made sense for me finally what I had been doing. Of like
Wow.
just always feeling either like super happy because something was going well with a guy, or feeling like super sad and upset because like he wasn't texting or whatsoever, or
Yeah.
feeling mediocre if like it was like kind of okay, but like completely like just my mood connected to any
Right. Yeah. So it was like almost like you said how they were doing
yeah
influenced how you were doing.
yeah
And so there was like no, yeah, if they were happy, you were happy. Uh-huh.
Exactly. And especially if they were like trying to connect with me and if they were trying to like form attachment. But I like, again, connecting to the attachment theory, I became anxious. But
Mm.
also, like, I became anxious when they became avoidant, But at the same time, I also switched. And I think I knew very well how to like pretend that I'm avoidant in order to keep those avoidant people close, like.
What's your secret? No, people are gonna be like,
But
ooh.
it doesn't work out. Like, it just makes it worse. This is why I tell everyone, like, be straight up with your feelings. Like, if you pretend like you're not into the person as much as you actually are, like, your feelings are just gonna get more because you obviously are into the person, while
Yeah.
theirs are probably staying the same, and then at some point, like, you're just like so in love and like they don't even know what they've gotten themselves into. And and then it just hurts much more in the end, right? Instead of just being
Yeah.
straight up like, this is the love I want, this is the love I deserve, and like, this is how I feel about you, and either you feel about me this way or not, bye.
I think
And
it's definitely hard to get to that point. So then after you were at that phase of like, oh my gosh, I realized what I'm doing. I'm playing anxious and avoidant. And now it sounds like you're in a really, really loving and fulfilling and healthy partnership. So I'm sure everybody's wondering, well, how did that happen?
I don't know. Well, a lot of like inner work. I really like build up my self-worth. Like this is the main thing that I started with, like really learning to love myself and like learning that I am a great person to be around, that I would want to date myself, that I'm lovable, you know, and like it sounds so like for me now it sounds so obvious, but at the time
Yeah.
like I didn't. And I also always chose men that weren't over their exes yet. So I always had this like
Oh.
comparing myself to their exes, and like instead of like really living my authenticity, really just being like I am who I am, and like that
Yeah.
is great. And yeah, just
Nora, how had we never talked about that? Because I released an episode on the sister moon. That's all I fucking talked about. We
oh
could do. That's hilarious. I mean, not hilarious,
yeah,
but I mean, like, yeah, it's just
yeah.
so common for women
Mhm.
to want to compare and
Mm,
like not be yourself because maybe if you are like their exes, then they'll love you too, type of thing.
yeah, yeah, totally. And but like to coming to my relationship then, so let me think, between the breakup, like with that person, and then my partner there now were, I think, two 2 years, 2 years probably, or
Wow.
1.5 years. Although I have to say, so should I like tell this
Yeah.
story?
Yeah, no, of
I,
course. People are like, oh my God, 2 years? Can it be 5 months or like a month?
um, but I dated people in between and I felt great, right? Like, I think this is the
Yeah.
thing. Like, I remember before I met my partner, like going up the stairs to my apartment and had just like kind of stopped dating someone that I saw, like was seeing in Berlin. And like kind of going up the stairs and being like, maybe I'll meet my partner when I'm like, I don't know, 40, or like, like maybe I'll meet my partner like later in life and all these kinds of stuff. Because like, again, astrology, like one astrologer once told
Yeah.
me that like, whatever. And I was like, I'm fine with that. Like my life is great. Like I'm
Ah,
dating and like keeping my self-worth high. Like I once heard this saying, like, you're going to love the sound of your steps walking away from like people that don't deserve you or something like that. And
mm-hmm.
I loved it. It was like a game for me at some point. I just was dating and I knew exactly what I wanted. Like I had like my 5 non-negotiables.
Yeah. What
And
are
like if
they?
oh God, I hope I remember them now. So it was, I feel like this is a topic where I could just speak forever. This is, by the way, why I'm doing the relationship pattern workshop soon, because like I just feel like I have so many like experience that I need to
Yeah.
share. But so it was how was it? Okay, so it was sexual attraction, definitely, because like my
Mm-hmm.
theme was like when it was like a guy that was into me and like was like everything on paper was good, like for some reason I wouldn't feel sexually attracted to them.
Yeah.
So and then I would like date them for like 3 months, but like actually not really be happy because I didn't think I deserved to have someone that is good to me, that loves me, that appreciates me, and I'm still like into them.
Yeah.
um so that was one. It was appreciation, because that again was something that I felt was lacking in my last relationship, of like always them actually like kind of being still into their exes and not appreciating me, the person that was right in front of them.
Mm.
It was consistency, because that was also something that really came up for me, this like being super like responsive and texting me, wanting to see me,
Right.
and then just like kind of dropping off of the earth until
Oh.
they wanted to go out for dinner again and things like that. um and then, God, I have to, I mean, if I have time I can look for them quickly. I have them.
Yeah,
I
we
wrote
can. Yeah, we can put them in the show notes
Yeah,
too. No.
I wrote an article about it once, actually, on Medium, where I like kind of wrote them
Oh,
all down. But like, yeah, and that really helped me, and I just felt great. And that was like 2 weeks later, I met my partner, and
yeah. Yeah. There's something so beautiful in that and so parallel to I always see that. It's like people
mhm,
are always asking for the formula of, well, how do I find that fulfilling, that healthy type of partnership? But there's
mm,
no way around it. Seriously, the only way or like the way that I've always heard other people say, and I've experienced myself, and you're validating it too, is just you fall in love with yourself to the point where you literally do not even care if the other person comes. And
Yeah.
that's when, like, when you've reached that point in your life where it just kind of clicks for you,
Yeah.
then it's like, oh. But sometimes what people do is they will try and fake that feeling in order to get that outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think it's an up and down, right? Like it's
Yeah.
a process, like, but it's also running into the fire, really. Like even after that person, like after that, I also dated someone that wasn't like that very much fit into that pattern, you know? But that was actually something that happened also before I met my now partner, where the first time I actually didn't play avoidant, you know? And
Oh.
like, I was actually like that is super uncool. Like, what are you doing here? Like, I feel like you're not even trying to like get to know me. And that was also a very common pattern for me of like people, like I felt like, and I hear this from a lot of clients where they feel like they're dating a person, then it's like kind of off, on and off. And they're like, if he just got to know me, he would like see what a great person I am. But like what I got to the point is if the person is not trying to get to know you and like doesn't make you feel like you can really show up as your true self, it's just not the right person for you. And like you got to leave. So
Yeah.
so I just want to say that like it was practice. Like dating is a way of practicing your self-worth. Like you first do it in the quiet, you build yourself up, and then you slowly bring it out and see how you can keep that up.
Right. And it's having those experiences of, well, are you stating your needs? Or it's like, how are you embodying the relationship that you actually want with this other person? And to your point, are you playing the avoidant person when really you actually are really into them?
Yeah.
And you want to share your feelings, but how honest and true can you be with them in this moment? So
yeah, exactly. And also letting go of this feeling that you need to be embarrassed for having feelings for someone, right? I think that was also the thing for me. Like I can only show that I have feelings for someone when they have feelings for me, you know? Like I cannot be the person who loves more, like, you know?
It's like, hello, you're supposed to date someone that loves you more, Nora.
And and I think that's something that was just so beautiful with my partner now. Like I think we started seeing each other, and like he actually told me first that he had feelings for me when I kind of didn't know. Like I was like, because I was having my list, I was like, do I feel like you feel romantically sexually attracted to you, you know, because it wasn't this like crazy instant pull that I had with the people before, because it was probably not trauma bonding, but like a healthy, you know. But he took it super well, and then for 2 weeks we just spent time together every day. Like we just wanted to connect with each other, be with each other. And then I told him, I just one day looked at him and I was like, why do I feel like I want to kiss this person?
But that you brought up something really important that I think is hard for people to discern of, how do I know it's attraction versus trauma bonding? Like, how do I know it's chemistry?
Yeah. Well, so my experience is, but again, that's just my own experience. Right. Like I felt like whenever it was like this instant crazy attraction and you literally felt like the world is like goes down beneath you, and like it's just you and this person, it seemed to be a pattern, you know. It seemed to be like this like trauma bonding, because it was always the same pattern of like, you know, not really getting my needs met. And also like this, like what I also always ask my clients, like besides the sexual attraction, is there anything else, right? Like, are you just trying to form attachment? Because like that's why we have sex. We trying to form attachment. And sometimes the sex is so good because there's no other attachment outside of the sexual part, you know?
Right.
And yeah, and it's like this, it's this dance, right? Like this trauma dancing. Like I speak about this a lot on my Instagram of like, you grow up in your family system and you learn a dance of how you interact with the family, right? Like maybe like a parent is like avoidant, or like a parent isn't there or is absent or whatsoever, or like the parents cheat on each other whatsoever, and like you just kind of learn how to interact in this family system. And then even though it might not feel good for you, it's still like what you learned is how it's supposed to be, how you receive and give love. You leave your family system, and then all of a sudden you meet a person who feels like home. And I think this is this trauma bonding thing, when like it just, you feel this instant connection because finally you meet someone outside of your family system who knows the steps to your dance. You can stay in your dance that you know from childhood. And I think that's that trauma bonding. But I still think like there can still be like a healthy amount of trauma bonding when you're with a person that's conscious, that's reflective, that's, you know, willing to grow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned someone knowing the dance that you were so used to playing. And so oftentimes you hear people say, oh, they just feel like home, or I feel like I'm at home. But it's like, which home are you in? Like
I'm getting goosebumps when you say that, because
right?
It's that trauma bonding, right? And like it's so hard to not lean into that because it feels so good. But anything for our brains that is new, even though it might be better, is like, don't want to do it. You know, it's like, I'm going to do what I know. And that's just this like keep reminding yourself of like, what is the relationship that you want? That's why this checklist is so helpful, to really be like, okay, there's sexual attraction, but there's no appreciation. There's no consistency, you know, all these things. Yeah. And also another thing that I remember what I kept doing is I meditated every day, and I really just felt into this feeling. And this is where hypnosis comes in again, right? Like really felt like this gratefulness for the relationship that I wanted to have. And I really felt into the feelings of how I wanted to feel with my partner. And that's exactly what I got in the end. So, and that also helps you to be like, wait, like you stop comparing the feelings that you have with a person, like with a trauma bond, for example, like, oh, this feels like home, to like, oh, this feels like my meditation.
But one of the biggest blocks I see is, you know, people who don't have a healthy foundation or a background, and they're just like, well, if I don't know what it looks like, well, how will I know when I'm out there dating? And so what kind of advice or guidance would you have for those people who don't have a healthy background and are having a hard time picking someone that feels like their meditation versus home?
Yeah. So I think what really helps is first to figure out what is it that you don't want, right? And this is like where it's just running into the fire. And like that's how I came up with the words that were important for me, because I had exactly the opposite, you know? So starting with that, and then that's where I personally use hypnosis, because I just think it's so amazing to like go through each stages of life and like what you need in each stage, you know, like where you find your purpose, where you find connection and all these things, and like show your subconscious that beautiful family that you could have had. And also I also think that's where also like when you do the inner child work in general, again, like just finding the opposites, like when you find a triggering emotion, for example, you're dating someone and they're making you feel small, or they're making you not feel lovable, and then like you go into it and what is it that you would have actually needed, right? And then clients come up themselves really quickly, like this is what I would have needed, like maybe it's communication, maybe it's respect, self-respect, and then connecting to those feelings. So I would always start with what you don't want.
That's great advice. So what current spiritual lessons are you learning now, or just what's kind of front and center for you?
For me right now, it's interesting because it's like what we were just speaking about, of this feeling that we both had before we had our partners come into our lives, this being like, I'm happy where I am. Like I know what I want is on my way, and I know it's coming, but like I'm super happy where I'm now. And I think this is what I'm trying to tap into more and more in my business, actually, right? Instead of like always this like thriving and like thinking how my business is supposed to look like, and just being like, everything that I want, everything that I truly desire already is in my life. And
Oh,
any worries that I have about future, because I think this is like oftentimes what's so connected with like money and things like that. Like, yeah, it's good now, but what is it about the future? Is
yeah.
just trusting the universe that everything's gonna go exactly the way it's supposed to. But it's a process. I'm not 100% there yet.
Yeah. And I see a lot of the spiritual lessons I learned in romance definitely applicable to the business world and how I
Mm,
experience it now. Just like
yeah.
even the whole dating aspect and experience with that, like having just
Mm,
different clients and what does that look like?
yeah.
And so it's like, oh, okay, I never really thought of it in this sense, but I'm so glad I have those stories and reference points to apply to what I'm experiencing right
Mm.
now as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what they say, right? The moment
Mhm.
you've like healed the patterns that you pick up in like relationship and dating, like the same things are going to show up in friendship or are going to show up yeah. And I think, yeah, it's but it's also nice, especially when we're like the people like you and me who like just
Yeah.
built their life around self-development. It's like just riding the waves, right?
I know. It was so funny because I was talking to a girlfriend yesterday and I was just telling her all these different things that I was going through. She said,
Mm,
wow, you are going through stuff, but you act like you're not even really attached to it. And I think it's
mm,
because, to your point, when you alluded to it of shadow work, it's you just, you know yourself to a point where you just think, oh, okay, this is coming up now, but I don't
mm.
have to attach myself to it or create meaning around it. It's just
Yeah.
information for me to know what I need to heal more, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I literally sometimes where like a shadow comes up and I'm like, yeah, I probably need to deal with that and like kind of push it away for a while. And I just know it's going to come up again. And it like keeps coming up in all kinds of different situations until I take the time to like do a hypnosis and heal it and stuff. But like,
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of doing this work is even though it might sting the first couple of times, it's almost like you're building that muscle stronger. So when it does
Mm,
come back again, it just isn't as, I don't know, it doesn't like knock you out as
that's
bad.
true.
Uh-huh.
That is, I think that's so true because I feel like, I don't know how it is with your clients, but I sometimes have clients who are like, oh, I'm going to do a coaching now, especially in Germany. I feel like it's not as common as in America to just have a coach, and they're like, I'm going to
Yeah.
do a coaching now. And then they're like so surprised all the
They're like, what
deep
is this?
stuff that we're working on. um but it's like really this like learning that like if you suppress so many like emotions and you haven't looked at so much stuff, it kind of like builds up and like first needs to come out in this whole like rush. But the moment like you
Mm,
have a natural flow in it, I feel like it's not as hard anymore, right? Like it's just like it's
yeah.
an ease and it's just part of life. But if you suppress it for like 10-20 years, of course there's going to be a lot that just has to come out at once with a lot of pressure.
Uh, I know exactly, exactly. Well, this has been so much fun. I loved talking to you. So, where you talked a lot about your relationship patterning workshop, I want to make sure what are the details on that?
There's no details. No, I will. I'm on it. Like I'm at the moment because I'm doing like quite a lot of workshops in Berlin right now around like yoga
Yay!
and like self-development and stuff. But like this has really been like calling for me to like really do a specific relationship
Ooh,
one on relationship patterning. Like I'm gonna do a lot of the things that we actually spoke about right now, right? Like figuring
amazing.
out what is your pattern, where did you pick it up, how can you resolve it, like where's your self-worth at, what can you do. I'll
Mhm.
see how like yeah, we'll see because I'm almost like I probably need to do like an online workshop about this that goes on for like multiple weeks, but I'm going to start with a day retreat, but there's no details yet. So probably sometime in August, September. But I will promote it on my Instagram, which is Nora.ring. Is that how you say it in
Yeah,
English? Yeah.
we will definitely put it in the show notes, all your
Yeah.
links, your Instagram, where people
Yes.
can follow you. So that's where your definitely alive on Instagram, the best way people
Yeah.
can get in touch with you.
Yes, and then of course on my website, you can find like my healing meditations in German and English, and yeah, just information about what I do, and yeah.
Oh, amazing. And if you ever travel to Berlin, you should definitely hit up one of Nora's yoga classes or
For
workshops that she's
sure.
doing.
Yeah.
We'll put all of those details in the show notes. But thank you again so much for coming on here, just sharing your wisdom about empowerment, relationships, your stories, all of that. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and asking all these really nice questions. It's really interesting to think about all these things.
Of course. Of course. I loved it. All right. Thank you everyone so much for tuning in. I do have a question. I always end my episodes this, like, and maybe I'll ask you this. So what are you doing to fill your self-love cup up and connect the little you? So what are your practices right now?
Oh God. So I started doing the Kundalini that you shared with me. So I'm doing that every day and I hate it. I'm still doing it. So I'm doing TDM. So I'm doing a workshop there, which is also like connected to hypnosis. And then I do my own hypnosis. So whenever like shadow stuff comes up, like I start to go into that. And then just walking out in nature. I live by a lake, so I'm really trying to connect with that. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that I forgot, but like that's the main thing right now.
Ah, that's so beautiful. So, so, so beautiful. Thank you again for coming on here. Such a lovely conversation. And I will catch all of you beautiful people later. All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.